Fasteners World and Hannah's Enterprises Company Limited.
Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this special tribute to the life and times of the late Pastor Hugh Roach, a former president of the Bahamas Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and a nation builder. Indeed, the nation was saddened a few days ago to learn of the transition of Pastor Roach. He was a faithful and quintessential nation builder. He was described as a gentleman par excellence who walked with dignity and grace. In a letter to the editor recently, the former Speaker of the House of Assembly, who served from 2012 to 2017, Dr. Kendall Major wrote, "I was honored when Pastor Roach accepted my invitation to serve as chaplain of the House of Assembly. Not only did he serve with distinction, he urged members of the House of Assembly to look at the urgency of social justice. Dr. Major said he constantly reminded us that we were only there but for a moment, serving under God's richest grace." Pastor Roach would be remembered as a teacher, a former principal of Bahamas Academy. He was a backyard farmer. Indeed, he is remembered as a scholar. During his tenure as chaplain of the House of Assembly, he was always present and engaged. Even when there was no house sitting, Dr. Major said, he often stopped by the House of Assembly, and he stopped there to cheer up the staff of the House of Assembly. On our program this evening, you are going to hear from a number of leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist churches in the Bahamas and friends and family members of the late Pastor Hugh Roach. Our tribute to Pastor Roach begins with this tribute from a family member, Clara McPhee.
I've always known Hugh. From the time I was a baby, I don't even remember when I got to really see him for the first time, when I saw him for the first time. You see, our fathers were very close. They were cousins, and they came down from Exuma about the same time. After arriving in Nassau, they bought one lot. They divided the lot into two. Hugh and those had the lot that was on the Young Street side, and we had the lot that was in the back, part of which was on Windsor Lane, and part was the corner just before, between dividing Young Street and Windsor Lane. I forgot to tell you that we were in Young Street. We moved to Young Street. Well, because of the close proximity of our homes, we were very, very close. In fact, we were so close that he called me his sister. Hugh, after he grew up, the girls used to come to me to get to him, okay? In fact, when he was growing up, he was very mischievous. I remember one time, he had the chicken pox, and he wanted me to get it. He was staying with us in our house because his mother had gone to work, and my mother had to keep him for the week. So he chased me all around trying to get his foot into my shoes to give me the chicken pox. And that's the kind of relationship we had growing up. Our first Christmas tree, I remember that vividly. Hugh, my brother Arthur, the neighbors across the street, they built a box cart 2 days before Christmas Eve. And on Christmas morning, those four boys, five, Arthur, Junior, Hugh, Ralph, and Percy Marley, who lived across the street, they went over Blue Hill and cut down the pine trees and brought it home. And we had our first Christmas tree, and they did that every Christmas morning thereafter for many years. Took the box cart and over the hill down Wolf Road. Wolf Road then was a track road. It wasn't that's as you know it today. There were very few homes, and even where we lived, there were very few homes. Most of it was bushes, but we would go over. When we were young, we went to Salem Baptist Church. Well, he did for a long time, because he joined the Adventist Church about when he was 15 or 16. But my parents, on the other hand, joined the Adventist Church when I was quite young, quite baby. So, and he joined the church, and he was an ardent follower of Adventism from then on, having gone through the ranks, be a teacher at Bahamas Academy, then principal, then on to becoming the president of the conference. Hugh was very studious, I remember that. He used to get up in the mornings when he was a teenager, young teenager, probably 13, 14. If you were to look at his window, at Junior in his room, about 5 o'clock in the morning, he would be getting up, he would be studying. So he took his lessons very seriously. And about 14, I think probably 14 or 15, he took his Cambridge Senior, and a couple of years later, his Cambridge Junior. As I said, we were so close. I must say, I'm going to miss him. You know, on some of our trips, when we went to Uncle Tommy's funeral, we were so close that we had the same hotel rooms, slept in the same double bed, you know, same double bed. We were that close. After these past few months, these past couple years, after he was not feeling well, he would call me and say, "Girl, what you cooking?" I said, "Well, what do you want?" And he would tell me he would want soup, okra soup. He would want, he liked the soup. One time he wanted potato salad. He didn't want much other stuff in it, but he wanted the old-fashioned Bahamian potato salad. So anytime, you know, he's going to be missed. I missed him already. He called me 2 days before he died. The Tuesday, he called me. He said, "Clara, how are you doing?" I said, "How are you?" He had just come out of the hospital. I said, "How are you?" So he was saying, "I fell out of the bed." And I couldn't understand him because I'm losing my hearing. So I said to him, "Hugh, I don't understand you very well because I can't understand you." He said, "I heard you're going deaf. You know, I heard you're going to deaf." But I said, "Hugh, I love you." So he said, "I love you too." And then that was it. That was it. 2 days after he came out of the hospital, that's the last time I spoke with him. I miss him. Okay, my brother.
We now hear a tribute from Dr. John Carey, who succeeded Pastor Roach as principal of Bahamas Academy.
My relationship with Pastor Roach goes back to our teenage years. Both of us attended the Grantstown Seventh-day Adventist Church on Wellington Street, but I became better acquainted with him when he joined the staff of Bahamas Junior Academy as my geography teacher. I was 14 years old and he was 18, fresh out of Bahamas Teachers College. Although short in stature and a very young teacher, he was firm in discipline. He gained the respect and admiration of both students and parents. An energetic and athletic young man, Pastor Roach was always involved in students' activities. I clearly remember him as a star pitcher on the softball team. He was also very active in the church. The elders and progressive thinkers at the Grantstown Seventh-day Adventist Church saw his potential and encouraged him to continue his education abroad. He decided to enroll in the theology program at Canadian Union College in Alberta, Canada. While at that institution, he excelled in his studies and represented the school well in a speech contest among the top students of Seventh-day Adventist colleges in North America. We were elated when we heard that he had won the contest. And when he came home, he entertained us by reciting the key segments of his speech, the Old Wild Inn. All the young men of the church respected and looked up to Pastor Roach as their role model. I recall that shortly after he came home from college, we were having a banquet for the young people, and several of us went to him to get his opinion as to what our attire should be. He was gracious in giving us some tips, which we eagerly followed. After completing his bachelor's degree in theology, he returned home as principal of Bahamas Academy. He became the first native principal of the school. Although the principal that he succeeded was referred to as professor, the title took a greater significance when Pastor Roach, a native son, was called Professor Roach. When I succeeded him, I felt that love and respect shown to the principal of the academy when I also was referred to as Professor Carey. During his principalship, Pastor Roach improved the physical plant and increased enrollment from about 200 to 600. He also expanded the curriculum and included music. The late Audrey Dane Wright, who had just graduated from the academy, was selected to develop this program, and under his guidance, she did a magnificent job. After 9 years as principal of Bahamas Academy, Pastor Roach was called into full-time gospel ministry. His success as an educator followed him into pastoral ministry. He was not only an outstanding preacher, but he was strong on visitation. I had the privilege of accompanying him on several of those visits when I served as his assistant at the Maranatha, Philadelphia district during his later years. As president of Bahamas Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Pastor Roach gave special emphasis to the family island districts. He made sure that a resident pastor was assigned to each district where a church was established. He was also instrumental in starting the Grand Bahama Academy with Mrs. Ruth McKinney as the first principal. An educator, pastor, conference administrator, community leader, and friend of all, Pastor Dr. Hugh Roach found time to fill the role of husband and father. He was indeed a true nation builder. The Adventist community and the Bahamian people in general will always remember the significant contribution Professor, Pastor Dr. Hugh Roach has made to our society. Today, we mourn his death, but we look forward to a great reunion on Resurrection Day.
Listen to this tribute from Pastor Paul Scavala, past president of the South Bahamas Conference of Seventh-day Adventists.
Pastor Roach. That name has become synonymous with Adventism, synonymous with compassion, synonymous with love and caring. My first recollection of this man of faith was as a student at Bahamas Academy way back in 1965 or thereabout. He was one who had at heart the development and the education of children. He, along with my father and Pastor S.M. McKinney, were some of the first Bahamian pastors in the Adventist Church, and we always admired his energy that he brought to ministry. And then we also admired his attention that he gave not only to us as students, but to the teachers and faculty members, and then the attention that he gave to his members as a pastor. And this was all magnified when we watched he and his wife, we call her Olga Roach or Auntie Audie, for he gave such detailed attention to her. He loved her with all of his heart and his being, and of course his children, Opal and Hubert. When I went off to school to do ministry and came back, I was assigned to Pastor Roach as an intern. He was my first senior pastor. Of course, I grew up in a pastor's home, but outside of that, he was my first senior pastor, and that was an assignment at the Centerville Church. And I have pictures of that occasion where I was ordained as an elder at that church with him standing by my side. And then when I had my first assignment to take over my own district, which was the Abaco district, it was Pastor Roach who was responsible for that event. And what stood out in my mind was when he called me in to discuss my assignment to one of the islands. It was either going to be to Abaco or to Eleuthera or to one of the other islands. And he looked at me and he said, Pastor Scavella, which one would you prefer? And I said, Abaco. And so said, so done. I was sent to Abaco, and we had many wonderful days there. He would visit me back and forth. He took me there, landed me, and presented me to the church in Abaco. Pastor Roach later became the president of the Bahamas Conference at that time, and I had the privilege of working again with him very closely as we sought to advance the kingdom of God. I remember when he brought in an evangelist, Evangelist Martin Burr, and my assignment was to work very closely with Elder Martin Burr in a family life crusade that was held just across from the Queens Highway restaurant, or I think they're on Wolf Road. And Pastor Rose said, Paul, I need you to take care of this evangelist. I want you to work closely with him, stay by his side. And also C.D. Brooks, who came to the Bahamas, he was responsible for having him come here from the Breath of Life program. Pastor Roach was one who loved to engage people. One of the things that he taught me was how to make a quick visit. You know, just touching bases with people, finding out how we could help, having a word of prayer, and then moving on. But at the same time, making people feel most important. And that was something that was very, 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 very exciting to me. And then I learned a number of other things from him, how to manage a service that had to do with public officials and other activities that are related to the public. He was a person who was just not gifted in terms of ministering to the Adventist Church, but he also taught me how to mingle and mix beyond the Adventist Church, engaging the public beyond that which was his primary place of labor. And he's known for that. He's known for that. Pastor Roach, when he got ordained to the ministry, there was a song that was played which was indicative of who he was and what his mission was. And that was to be a source of comfort to people, to be a voice, as it were, crying in the wilderness, directing them in a path that would lead to life and life eternal. And Pastor Roach always lived up to that. My final moments with him happened a couple of weeks ago when I informed him that one of his former parishioners, Sister Nelda Bow, had passed during this COVID time. And he said, "Pastor, I really would like to attend that final service for her, which was at the funeral home." And so I said to him, "Pastor Roach, I don't know if you're well enough to make this." He says, "I would like to go." And so I went and picked him up, drove him to the funeral home. He gave some wonderful, encouraging words to the family. And that was the last activity that we had together. I was so happy that I didn't follow my initial inclination to not have him go out. And he went and he ministered, and that brought joy to his heart. For me, his life was one that was characterized by integrity, kindness, love, compassion for others, and most of all, for helping people, young workers and others, to understand that the best thing to happen to them and to us was to know Jesus and to walk with him throughout this life, because there is a better life that is coming.
Pastor Basil Stirrup, Ministerial Director at the South Bahamas Conference.
Andrew Young, former mayor of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and the former ambassador to the United Nations, once said about Martin Luther King Jr. that a man such as this comes along in every 100 years. I believe that those words are applicable to Pastor H.A. Roach. I met him as a little child growing up in Grand Bahama, and he came to Freeport to conduct an evangelistic campaign. And from the age of 7, he made an indelible impression on my life until the day he died. I know Pastor Roach as a person who everybody respects, loves, and in some cases even revere. And there are 4 characteristics that I would like to use to describe him on this program. The first is maturity. The second is consistency. The third is decisiveness. And the fourth is strength. When I think of a matured person, and I read the scriptures that says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I understood as a child, and I spake as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Dr. Roach exemplifies that passage of scripture. I've never known this man to hold a grudge or to be a person who just had a bad attitude. He was always upbeat, he was always full of life, and he was always encouraging. And that mature spirit became infectious to anybody who was around him. And I believe it is the maturity that caused him to be consistent. The H.A. Roach that I knew as a child is the H.A. Roach I knew that died a few days ago. He was always the same person. He was not a different person today where if you approach him, you felt as if he would snub you or put you off, and then tomorrow he would embrace you. He was consistent in his demeanor and behavior, always had a welcoming spirit. In fact, he was so consistent that he appeared to be everywhere at the same time. I could recall many important events in my life, and sometimes I don't even know how he found out about it, but he was always there, presenting a smile and to encourage me, to pat me on the back and to say, keep going forward. I remember when I was asked to serve as chaplain for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and I did not send Pastor Roach an invitation, but the day that it took place, he was there. At my wedding, he was there. At my graduation, he was there. It seems as if all of the very important and memorable events in my life, he was always there. And then he was very decisive. He knew how to make a decision. And this is something that the world needs today. Men and women who are able to make a decision, even if it's a wrong decision and some corrective measure needs to be taken later. He was not afraid to make a decision. And then I remember him as a man of strength. He was strong. In the midst of crisis and adversity, he was able to stand and speak with confidence and to give people who were going through difficult times and losing hope, he was able to give hope back to those individuals. This man became one of my mentors in ministry and one of my spiritual fathers. And I pay tribute to him today because I've grown to love him, his wife, and his family. The Seventh-day Adventist Church believes in a resurrection morning. And Pastor Roach is going to be sadly missed. But I am not weeping like those who do not have hope. I believe that one day the trumpet is going to sound. The dead in Christ shall rise in the first resurrection. And we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together to meet the Lord in the air. And the Apostle Paul declares, so shall we ever be with the Lord. And so I'm going to miss him dearly, and he's going to be sadly missed by thousands of people, not only here in the Bahamas, but all around the globe. I started this brief tribute talking about another mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in a few days, we're going to lie the bodily remains of Pastor Roach to rest in a place that has been designated. And I recall reading an article where the Reverend Dr. Ralph Abernathy made a statement when he committed Martin Luther King's body to the ground. He said that we will commit this body to the ground, but his legacy and his spirit is too wide for the grave. And this is the case with Pastor Roach. We will commit his body to the ground, but his legacy and his spirit will live on through all those who he touched, through his family, and one day we will meet again.
We now listen to Pastor Peter Joseph, former Executive Secretary of the South Bahamas Conference.
Today I speak with a sense of anticipation and also reflection. And I want to reflect first on a great man who passed this way, Pastor Dr. H.A. Roach. I reflect on his self-sacrifice. Whenever one comes in the presence of Dr. Roach, he immediately figures out that there is a man who would empty himself for the next generation. And I'm one of those persons that received copiously from the gifts and talents of this great man of God. None of us who received from him will ever forget what he has done to build us. As a matter of fact, we stand on his shoulders. Oftentimes I think about what makes a faith community viable and productive. What keeps it going? It continues because you have three generations: the present generation, the future generation, and the past generation. Dr. Roach was a part of the generation of the past that gave us memory and roots. A man who would often show up to meetings. A man who, even when he was older than us and understood more than we understood, kept us on purpose and mission. He was a tremendous preacher and an evangelist, a man of God, a man who visits. And when he visits, he makes us feel valuable, makes us understand the importance of continuing the faith. And then I want to anticipate a little bit, because I believe that because Dr. Roach poured into us copiously his talents and gifts as it relates to gospel ministry and even education, that the future is bright. And I believe that his good work will live on through us. The scripture says, "Blessed is the man who die in the Lord. From henceforth, yea, said the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them." I deeply regret his passing, and I mourn with the family. And I extend deepest sympathies on behalf of my wife, Michelle, our sons, Newton and Edmond, and on behalf of my mother-in-law, Ruth McKinney. I extend deepest sympathies. I've learned so much about this man even through my father-in-law, Dr. McKinney, because it was Dr. McKinney who supervised as his board chairman when Dr. Roach was the principal of the Bahamas Academy. What a great man. I say a great man passed this way. He was the pastor's pastor, and I'll see him in the morning.
This special tribute to the life and times of Pastor Hugh Roach will continue after these messages.